Thank you everyone for coming today. This is the panel discussion for Jumping Eagle versus Trump. As you all know, we are suing the United States government, in particular President Trump himself, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Energy Transfer Partners over Standing Rock.
What do you think in terms of the treaty violations? Because according to federal Indian lawyers I've spoken to, this whole pipeline route is actually on Standing Rock Sioux land, not just how they navigate, oh, well, this is where the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation is not going to be affected. Can you kind of talk about the treaty right violation?
And to speak on the treaty aspect, the land that the Ocheti Chakoi camp was on treaty land, the land that all of that land there. So we stood on that land. We lived there. And we were protecting the water. We were protecting the land because that is our land. We, like Sarah says, we don't forget. We have never forgotten that those are our lands. They belong to us. They belong to our ancestors. They belong to all the generations coming. That we have relatives that bathe their children in that water, that drink that water, that depend solely on that water source. And so we stood there and we lived there and we prayed there in defense of all of that. I believe that we should have been allowed legally to remain because those are our treaty lands, and it is our right to stand on treaty lands, especially in defense of everything that is sacred to us. We were involved in, at the end, we were issued the eviction. A really unfair and unrealistic eviction, given the timeline that we had. We had been making attempts to clean, to protect and take care of the land, and it just was impossible to finish that job in the timeline that they had wanted us to. I had been told at different times from different strategists that being there in that location was not, that there was nothing we could do. It was not a good strategy. But we didn't feel that way because in our hearts we knew that was where we were supposed to be, because those are our treaty lines, and it's right there. It's right there in the face of DAPO. It's right there in the face of the construction of that pipeline. And we have the right to be there as descendants of the treaties. Now, after everything played out, we saw the aggression. We lived through the aggression. We lived through all of the violations of laws on every level. I'm sorry, it's still very hard for me. We lived through that, and we went through the eviction. As that process happened every day, in the beginning of that negotiation process, we asked the Army Corps of Engineers for an extension on that date. Every day they came back and said no. The whole world called the Army Corps of Engineers and asked for an extension. Every day they came back in the morning for that meeting and they said no. So finally, in those last 2 days, they wanted to come in and they wanted to continue the cleaning, and we said no, you cannot. You have not given us any honor in this process, so you cannot come in today. We need to have this time to pray together, to be together, to honor all of our sacred things that we don't have time to get out of here. There were sacred things within the camp that were disrespected in their bulldozing after the eviction, during the eviction. So we believed that was our place to stand, to be. We were cleaning, we were wanting to move to higher ground because nobody wants to be in a flood. And there was all this talk of a flood, but they never brought any science, any facts, any papers stating, any history of weather reports, any predictions of that there might actually be a flood. There was just talk. And, but even considering that, we were still cleaning up and we wanted to move to higher ground. We wanted to hold our ground. because that's what we believed and we felt in our hearts. That is, that's our treaty land. So everything happened and then we were removed. After the fact of being removed, it was acknowledged to me that yes, this was the most powerful place you guys could have been. There are many pipelines that are near Indian lands, that are near sacred sites, but that none are as close to treaty lands as the Dakota Access Pipelines. And they referenced in past tense that we had the strongest point in that land we were at. And so it's been really hard to bear that knowledge that we knew that. That's what we were telling the world. That's why we stayed. And then to have it acknowledged after the fact, as in past tense, like we no longer have that, it's not true. That it's not a past tense thing. It's still our land. We still have this stance, and maybe we have to come in through a different door now. Through the laws, through the courts. But we're not a people that give up. Even if there's a loss, as Bruce said, don't lose hope. The power is within all of us collectively. It's within all of us individually to stand up and to keep going until we find the right door to where we need to be. So throughout, we're resilient, and we need to continue to hold our hope and to hold our prayer and our belief and keep moving forward.
And the area where the Ochete Oyate camps are all treaty territory. 1851 and the 1868 treaties guaranteed our Lakota people's rights to those lands. And it was not only the land, but the use of the waters, hunting, fishing rights, and our right to live there. But during the times gradually that the U.S. government decided that it wanted more and more land, it's been gradually chipped away, but there was never a new treaty put in place. And so those laws still stand. The other aspect of the treaty rights to the area is that we never gave up use of those lands. The Cannonball Ranch is actually another area that should be a historic, under the Historic Preservation Act as well. We have stories in that area of our people fleeing the cavalry. We have places there that are sacred and that are often used. So for the government, and especially the state of North Dakota, to allow the Energy Transfer Partners and Dakota Access Company to purchase that land without our agreement to that. Not only to purchase it, but then to use it to contaminate our water is so egregious. And of course the government is trying to avoid addressing those issues as far as, because they know that that we're right. And so they want to continue to justify their use of eminent domain, and we've seen that in other areas too. People are fighting in Iowa and Nebraska against the pipeline as well. So they are gonna continue to try to avoid those issues because they have no standing. The treaties were negotiated as part of, and I think in America they like to forget our history, but the Lakota people won a war, and the United States government had to come and negotiate peace with our people, and that was how those treaty boundaries were defined. And so although the US government and people want to forget that those were the negotiations that happened, we don't forget, and we know that is our land that we live on.
So we're working on, in this case, really making sure that the sacredness is taken into account. I was out there, and I asked why the place was called Cannonball when I first went. And I don't know that this was ever spoken of enough in any of the articles I read or any of the media. But the reason it's called Cannonball is because of the natural whirlpools that used to form perfectly round stones. And I apologize because my pronunciation of the language of the Lakota Oyate is not always perfect, but Tunkan is what I was told, that these round stones are very sacred and that they can represent many things, and they're used as a focal point in ceremony. And I was told they represent that oneness, that wholeness, the earth, the entire universe, and the center of the universe, which is also within each of us. And so that stone is a microcosm of everything sacred. And that's the place they form, right there, at Cannonball, at Standing Rock. Crazy Horse himself wore a tunkan when he would ride into battle. And he was never wounded in battle. And so these stones, they are sacred in and of themselves, but the place that they form is sacred. The water that forms them is sacred. And whereas all water is sacred, all water is life, that place is very special. That place is very significant. And it's already been desecrated other times. First, when there was the wars where that land even had to be put under treaty control. Second, when Lake Oahe was formed. And that as well, they were going to put the dam further north. And they decided, oh, that would affect too many non-native ranchers. And so instead they put it on the reservation. And a lot of land was lost. A lot of people were forced out of their homes. And now we see it again. These aspects are being argued in this case. We're trying to bring up not just the sacredness of water, but the sacredness of this specific body of water, the sacredness of this specific place, all the burial sites that have been desecrated, all of the sacred sites and the prayer sites that are around this, and people, they don't maybe have the experience of always relating to a natural place as sacred. And that's one problem we do have with the government. They always look for structures. They always look for proof. Show us something you built here. Show us how you changed the natural landscape so that we can understand that you thought it was sacred in its natural form. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And so working in Indian law itself is many times a contradiction in worlds. And bring in things that maybe they've never even held as sacred or as religion and help them understand that that is what we're protecting up there. That is what this case is about. It's not just about land rights. It's not just about human rights. It's not just about the honoring of treaties. It's everything. This case is very unique in that there is not an area of law that it doesn't touch in some way. And so then the challenge is to take all those pieces and make them a cohesive whole that is understandable in a short fashion to a court on a few sheets of paper.
We do have experts from around the world, mechanical engineers, water specialists, etc., people who build these pipelines for a living. And they have parsed them, analyzed this pipeline quite thoroughly. I don't know if all of you know this already, but the length of pipeline that is being routed under Lake Oahe is 7,500 feet long. It's called horizontal directional drilling, HDD pipeline. This is by far the longest length of pipeline ever recorded on record. The next closest is 3,000 feet. So this has never been done before. The Army Corps and Energy Transfer Partners, etc., are all claiming that this is a safe route. That's an absolutely ludicrous and unsupportable claim. There are so many problems with this process. Not only is this an unprecedented length of pipeline, there's no way to inspect the oil as it's flowing through. So a long, slow, continuous leak is what will happen. Our experts have made it quite clear this is not an if scenario, this is a when
This is a when this will leak. There are 3 aquifers under Lake Oahe. This water source connects to downstream. There are 17 to 20 million people who will be affected. So this is basically a catastrophe waiting to happen. It's a long, slow developing catastrophe, but that's the scenario we can realistically predict and that we can really show in court. So not only that, but just one quick last detail on this pipeline, because it's been such a bizarre process. The weld joints of an HDD length of pipeline are every 40 to 80 feet. Those weld joints, by nature, are susceptible. They're vulnerable points for this pipeline. The federal government, which is basically a captured party by this industry, only requires that 10% of those weld joints are inspected before this HDD length of pipeline goes underground. When it goes underground, it's pulled under Lake Oahe from one side to the other, and it's not inspected afterward. There's no technology in existence that is capable of inspecting this pipeline once oil starts flowing. More than that, we have more experts who will testify to other sort of shocking scenarios around this. But the point is, this is an extremely reckless pipeline. This is the worst possible route they could have chosen. There are several other possible routes. So at the very least, we have to stop the oil. Even if it starts flowing, we intend to stop it.
People ask me, so why, if this pipe is going to be buried so deep in the land, how does it affect, the water, and how does it affect your spirituality? And in our Lakota prophecies, there's a prophecy of the black snake, and just the existence of the pipe under the earth, oil or not, the existence of it is a violation of our spiritual ways, because it is literally a rape, a violation of Mother Earth. And they ask, so if it is 100 feet deep, how will it pollute the water? And one thing is that I think this pipe has 187 places where it's welded. And if you can imagine threading anything into the earth that has that many welded spots, and it has to go down and it has to go around several angles, the likelihood that there will be no leaks before oil even flows, it is impossible. And once the oil flows, this toxic tar sand oil, the most poisonous kind of oil, will leak down into the earth, and they have no technology to detect those leaks, and they have certainly no way to repair them. If you can imagine this being 100 feet deep. Not only that, but there are aquifers straight down, and when that oil leaks into the earth, it would poison those aquifers that affect many other states. So once this oil leaks from the pipelines, we know it goes into the earth, we know it goes into the water, affecting the medicinal plants in the water, affecting the animals that drink the water, affecting our cultural ways of fishing and hunting that are central in our spiritual ways, our cultural ways. It affects everything from there. Our ceremony, so much of our ceremony and spiritual ways involve water. And in taking water, the abstinence from water, honoring water as a source of life, not just a resource, a source of life. And so when this oil flows, it's affecting all the levels, biologically, culturally, spiritually, in all the ways. There's no way. We know by the other oil spills already how it will affect health. And the oil spills, for example, in Enbridge, we see the dramatic rise in cancer, in terminal illnesses, in deaths, dramatic, of the animals, of the people. And so we are doing everything we can do to take a stand for protecting our spiritual ways, but also literally protecting a physical genocide of our people. The relocation that has happened on our reservation some years back to infertile lands already has been such a violation of our people, and to have the waters flow, it's our only source of water for the Great Sioux Nation. So if you think about your only source of water is poison, how could that not affect everything?
As Tangerine said, I'm acting as the lead attorney. Actually, Red Wolf is an attorney, as you know. So we've moved to intervene. We have 14 plaintiffs led by Dr. Sarah Jumping Eagle, and to a degree we've exploited Sarah's name because Jumping Eagle v. Trump just has a good cachet to it.
My name is Dr. Sarah Jumping Eagle. I'm Oglala Lakota and Minnewaca, Dakota. I'm originally from Kyle, South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and I currently live on Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota. And I'm a physician, I'm a pediatrician as well, and I've been active in public health and environmental health issues for going on 10 years now, I would say. For us as Lakota people, we are going to continue to demand justice in this world, and we're going to hold those accountable who violate laws and who violate our rights. Not only our religious freedom rights, our right to clean water, but our right to live on the land and for our children to live on the land in the future as our relatives before us did. And those are the rights and our ways of life that we're going to continue to fight for.
I have lived at the Ocheti Shakoli, Ocheti Oyate camp. It's been referred to as both. But I have lived there with my family, with my mother, with our children. And so we've seen a lot of things. We've witnessed a lot of hardship, a lot of things that most people in my world question. They say, how is that legal? How are they doing that? And I don't have the answer because a lot of the things that we've experienced are not legal. And they're not okay. So I don't have the answer for the world when they say that's not possible, because we've lived it, we've seen it, and it will continue to go on unless we stand up and we put our foots down and we say no more. We want to hold this country accountable. We want to set a precedent so that everyone in the world can hold their governments accountable for the destruction of our lands.
My name is Dr. Shawnee Phillips. My daughters and I are enrolled members of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. And I'm here and part of this, also in my work at home, I'm a clinical psychologist. But I'm here to see that we bring justice to our people, this environmental racism that's happened that is literally a legal violation of our laws in terms of the environmental impact statement being already in the Federal Register and not being honored by this administration, as well as our treaty rights being violated, our treaty rights to protect our water. And as we know, when DAPL leaks, we know that toxic tar sand oil will poison our waters, which touches everything in who we are. So literally this will result for us in genocide of sorts, and spiritually, culturally, the land, the water, the people. And so I know in my heart, every day when I look into my daughter's eyes, I need to be able to tell them that we've done whatever we can do on all the levels. On all the levels. It's a survival mode now to whatever we need to do to stand for this change, to stand for the truth of what really needs to be this paradigm shift. And so when I look into their eyes, I need to be able to say we've done everything we can do to protect our culture, our people, our water.
We're also arguing that the Army under President Trump illegally reversed the Army's position from 6 weeks earlier under President Obama. Now, what happened last summer was that permits were given by the Army Corps to Dakota Access to build a pipeline in general, but they hadn't yet rendered a decision on the easement to cross under what the Army calls its lands at Lake Oahe. Now, the waters are controlled in large part by the tribal governments who have reserved rights. But these were really treaty lands that were diminished by Congress at various times in the 20th century. So although the Army Corps has title to it, the tribes ultimately claim ownership of this. But in terms of the narrower issues we're faced with right now, in December, the Army Corps issued a whole set of fairly comprehensive findings that not enough study had been given to, one, alternative routes, No study was given to it by anybody except Dakota Access. The Army rubber stamped its report. And 2, the environmental impacts of a leak at this location. And 3, the impact on cultural and religious life for the tribal members and their governments at that location. And the Army Corps issued extensive findings explaining why more study was needed. Well, President Trump came into office and simply ordered by what he called a presidential memorandum, which is not something I knew existed. He said, I instruct the Secretary of the Army to instruct the Army Corps of Engineers to expedite its review and to end the comment and notice periods. Now, where does the president, no matter who he is, get the power to order an expert agency to expedite its review? Well, he doesn't have that power. You know, imagine a group of engineers are assigned by Congress the task of approving a permit based upon environmental study. And the president, who's a real estate broker, he comes in and he announces, well, I'm ordering you to expedite that review. You know, I who, build hotels and things of that nature, I can tell you that you don't need more time. I can order you to hurry up your expert analysis. That's precisely what happened. And the Army, being the Army, just followed President Trump's diktat, so to speak. So the issue we're really challenging here administratively is that the president had no power to do what he did. That's one thing. That's why Jumping Eagle is suing Trump, because President Trump does not have that authority. Now, the president has a lot of powers, but this is not one of them. And the case law says where there appears to be political coercion on an expert agency, the court has to look very carefully at the result of that inquiry. The second point is that even assuming he had the power to expedite that review, which he didn't, the Army Corps simply announced, we've concluded our review, we find the original record from before December was fine, and we accept the easement, we don't see any need for further study. Now, although they took about 8 pages to say that, literally most of the 8 pages was just a listing of all the documents that were earlier in the record. They literally made no findings of fact as to why they now disagreed with themselves from 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks earlier, they said we need more study. They explained why. President Trump comes in and all of a sudden, well, we don't need any study. The original record was fine, and we don't have to tell you why we think that now. And that's really where we stand. We actually are in that sort of, Alice in Wonderland world, where, black is black on December 20th, and black now becomes white on January 23rd. And the sky is up one day, and it's down the next day, and 2 is 3, and 3 is 2. We're simply switching around things. And so this is actually a very strong case, in my view, because administrative agencies have to make findings. They're courts, actually. They have to study a case, they hear evidence. They can't cut off the comment period 2 weeks earlier and prevent our clients here from introducing their comments. And they can't simply rubber stamp a decision without explaining in detail and in substance why they're doing it. Well, that's exactly what has happened here. So that is essentially what this case is about. The complaint actually also alleges environmental discrimination. This is an area of law that's not widely litigated, but where a government agency grants a permit to any private developer to engage in any kind of potentially threatening activity, if an environmental threat, if it falls unduly, the burden, on an ethnic or racial minority, and there's no logical explanation for why that location was chosen, one argues that that violates the civil rights laws of the United States. And so here there was initial consideration given to running this pipeline near Bismarck, a mostly white community. And then it was pulled from there with no real analysis, except to say, well, there are a lot of streams over there that have to go through. And it was put over here, right where the Sioux communities are based, almost exclusively Sioux. in ethnicity and nationality. And any leak is going to burden those communities and their drinking water. And no explanation has been given as to why, in substance, the original route by Bismarck or alternate routes could not have been used. So that's another element of our complaint. And the Obama administration said not enough study was given to this. No study was given to this. Then the Army Corps turns around under Trump 6 weeks later and says enough study was given, but doesn't explain why it now disagrees. So that's the essence of the case.
Comical that the Army Corps, the governor, all the folks of North Dakota and the federal government, they weren't concerned about anybody's safety for months, getting brutalized. Suddenly, when they wanted you out for their own reasons, it could flood, and debris might go into the water. So it was obviously, not genuine. Bruce, I wanted to ask you two things. One, for the layman who hasn't been attached to this case, isn't it illegal in the first place that they didn't do an environmental impact study? I know that the company kind of fudged it a little bit, making it seem like it wasn't one long pipeline. They made it seem like it was several smaller things connecting. But couldn't that be used, the fact that for an infrastructure project this large, there was not an environmental impact study done? And the second part to that is, how is this case different than the other ones as far as what was illegal in terms of the environmental impact study process?
The president does not have the power to order an expert agency to expedite or hurry up its review. Presidents just can't do that. And we've also asked for damages only because we thought that's a way of getting his particular attention, since money is important to the president. He did own shares, and I think he may still own shares in Energy Transfer Partners. And so that makes it more egregious that he interfered in this process in order to hurry up the inquiry and to end the comment period. I mean, the president is exceeding his authority, and he does so in favor of a business in which he owns shares. That's fairly egregious personal intervention. And that's why we sued the president personally. And I don't know where that will go, but that's a different issue than the tribes have raised. So that we've added that dimension into the case. The reason no environmental impact statement was done was because the Dakota Access Partners got away with arguing that this was, as you just mentioned, a series of little segments of pipelines that each would stand or could stand independently. Now, this thing's going to run from North Dakota way down to, I guess, St. Louis. I forget exactly where it ends. It's 1,700 miles. And obviously, no one is building this just to bring oil from, say, Cannonball to, name a town in North South Dakota. Sioux Falls. No one's making this pipeline just to truck oil from Cannonball to Sioux Falls and say, well, we built a separate pipeline from Cannonball to Sioux Falls. But that's exactly what the Dakota Access got away with. They convinced the Army that, well, because each section could be a beginning and an end of a separate pipeline, we don't really need to do an environmental impact statement because no one segment is long enough to justify it under the law. So by this fiction that they're not building one long pipeline, but they're building little pipelines that by coincidence will all communicate with each other, they got away without the required environmental impact statement. And this is one of the things that the Army Corps looked at and said in December, we need more study as to whether it's appropriate to have avoided that test. This is one of those reasons people go to law school at times, so they come up with rationalizations to help their clients. And, the Dakota Access lawyers deserve credit for coming up with this deceptive scheme and in manipulating the environmental laws of the United States. But it is a manipulation. I mean, it makes no more sense than to say a worm is 20 separate segments and that, each one can roll around on its own.
Or a snake.
Or a snake. Right, I mean, you don't chop a snake in 20 pieces and say, look at the 20 pieces. It's one cohesive unit. It's intended to bring oil from the north to the south. And obviously this was a deception. So that's how they got away with it. And the Trump administration has offered no explanation, and you can look at the papers yourselves, as to why they now changed their view. from 6 weeks earlier. And, you know, what lawyers do is they'll write up a finding, a piece of paper, right, 8, 9 pages, that looks like it says a lot. And in reality, it says very little. And most of it's just a listing of every document that was filed a year earlier. And then at the end, they say, we've reviewed this and find that the record was good enough, but they don't explain why. And literally, you go through 8 pages of densely written material to find no explanation of what the Army Corps did as to why they did it on February 3rd and February 7th of this month.
To the inaccurate data that was used in terms of the disadvantaged populations that they evaluated surrounding the Bismarck area and what they used outside the reservation area rather than reservation data, that they based it on that to make the decision, so effectively doctoring the documents.
Report on differential burdens on the Native American community versus the white community in Bismarck was conducted solely by Dakota Access Pipeline. Now that's legal. Developers present reports of their views. But the government's not supposed to just stamp it and rubber stamp it. They're supposed to do some independent analysis. There's absolutely no analysis in the record by the government. Shawnee, your other point was the solicitor's report. The Interior Department solicitor, who's the chief lawyer for the Interior Department, in December issued on December 3rd a very, very detailed analysis as to why an environmental impact statement should have been done and was most likely required. And the solicitor concluded that there was a failure to, it doesn't matter, it's not working, that there was a failure to meet the law in terms of the required environmental impact statement. And this synthetic idea that we can chop the snake in 20 pieces and we have 20 little snakes instead of one large snake, the solicitor said did not justify ignoring the environmental impact standard study. And so what Shawnee is driving at is that the solicitor, highest legal authority in the Interior Department, came in with a very detailed analysis. The Trump administration said we disagree, but it did not explain why. And so we're in a situation where a detailed analysis by a government agency is ignored in favor of an order by the president to end the inquiry.
My name is Washewi Young, and I am from Standing Rock in North and South Dakota. I was born in North Dakota, and I grew up on Standing Rock, and for the past 6 months, we've been camped at the confluence of the Cannonball River and Missouri River, and so my family was out there. Previous to that, I worked as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe from 2003 to 2015. In that capacity, I testified before the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission 3 years ago against the Dakota Access Pipeline, and on the basis that they did not consult, the Army Corps of Engineers did not consult with the tribe, and basically they had construction up and running in various states before any permits were issued, and that was 3 years ago. So after that job, I felt like I was able to freely voice my concerns as a mother and a citizen of Standing Rock, and be able to stand up, and that's what we've been doing. And I'm so glad for this experience, and I'm glad to be able to be part of this case because of the environmental injustice that is occurring, the desecration of our sacred sites and our graves and our homelands, and ultimately, when it does leak, that will affect our primary drinking, our water source for Standing Rock. So that's why I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Creator. Thank you, Mother Earth. Pray that you will help us to see clear as the eagle, walk pure and strong, see clearly what must be done, have the strength, courage, and wisdom to do so in a good way. Creator, we know that you have established natural laws, and we know that we have established our own, and we know that sometimes those laws come in conflict. So we pray that you will guide us as to how to bring those back into balance. We know that all the pollutions, the troubles in the world, that those are a reflection of our own imbalance and our own pollution in our own minds. We pray that you will help us to learn how to bring that clarity and that clean water into the courts, where for so long people have been used to the dirty water that we've been given. As we bring that clean water in and help it cleanse things, we pray that the natural law can help the human law come into balance and into justice, into a way that can actually respect the rights of people, the rights of the land, the rights of the water. And we pray that you help us to carry this with us wherever we may go. We know that the sparks of the sacred fire, as we were told by the elders, our looking horse, and the many others who came out and would speak to the people, the youth council, the women elders, as they would guide us, and said that those sparks would land in our hearts and be carried around the world to light new fires. So as we move forward and we're in this battle for our clean water, it's really a battle for our future as humans, to be able to continue to live with the earth. And so we pray, Creator, to you and to Mother Earth, that you will help us so that we can come back into balance with you and continue to be here as human people, that our children and the 7 generations to come may also be able to live in this way and in these natural laws. So today we ask for this. I'm going to share a song. We use this song for journeys, and this is going to be a journey. And so we pray that we give each other strength on this, and Creator, Mother Earth, that you give us strength, so that as we travel on this, wherever we're struggling along the way, and anytime that we might lose our path, that we always be able to feel you under us and feel you above us and feel that spark within us to keep finding that way forward.
So, defend the sacred. I know that's something that probably a lot of us have said and felt and seen of late. And I know Red Wolf mentioned this convergence of different worlds. And here we are. We're a convergence of very, very different worlds. And I know there's been a sense of hope and a sense of hopelessness. The sense of, we might succeed and great failure. These are very, very troubling and scary times. That said, as I described before we started this panel, Revolution Truth came together because we believe in people power. We are all volunteer. We're from all over the world, from very, very different backgrounds and walks of life. I mean, wildly different. And yet we are all here. We are all being changed by Standing Rock, by these women, by all of our plaintiffs. And as we sit here before you, I know every one of us feels that this is totally possible. We can do this. We have to stick together for the long haul. You can go to revolutiontruth.org, and we have a PayPal fundraiser. We do rely entirely on public funds. And you can also go to Stop DAPL, Stop Trump on GoFundMe. 100% of these funds go to funding this case and making sure we get our plaintiffs to court, etc. So we appreciate every dollar. Thank you very much. We also take more volunteers.
So even if this oil begins to flow, the case is not over. The oil can flow. We don't want it to. It could start. Judge Boasberg in May, June, July, August can rule in our favor and stop that flow of oil. So don't ever be discouraged because you hear, well, that motion lost, they're going to start the oil line. And in law, you got to be in it to the end to know the result. So don't say, oh, we lost, we can't support it anymore, I'm not going to give any money. That's how you lose cases. You got to stay in it. And because a single loss now doesn't mean anything. And by the way, that's the whole history of Indian law in this country. For a long time, Native American groups were abused in law. And then the worm turned. And in the early part of the 20th century, courts started to recognize these rights. And even though there are setbacks today, there's a huge body of law that favors Native American nations. And that's what we use. So don't ever be discouraged when you hear about a temporary setback.
I would also ask people to look at ACLU, North Dakota. There's been many human rights and civil rights violations, and we've been living in occupied territory for quite some time now. And also to contact your leadership in your state and ask them what they're doing about this.